Tonight on The Wrap, Iran launches missile attacks on Israel for the first time since the ceasefire came into force in April. In a major escalation of the military action, Israel is tonight threatening retaliation, while Iran says it will fight back even harder if it's hit again. President Trump says he's telling Netanyahu not to retaliate. We'll have the latest from the Middle East and from Washington. Also tonight, in an exclusive interview with the Ukrainian president before he attended talks in Downing Street, Volodymyr Zelenskyy tells Sky News he is willing to freeze front lines to help negotiations and reveals the role of the former Chelsea Football Club owner Roman Abramovich in those talks.
When he got message from me, he said he will go directly to Putin. I said, OK, I'm ready to meet.
Hitting the jackpot, 19-year-old Kimi Antonelli becomes the youngest person to win the Monaco Grand Prix. We discuss the day's biggest stories with Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator, James Heal, and the Political Editor of Politics, Joe, Ava Santina Evans. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's papers, including the US being warned to stay out of the UK's migration debate. Good evening. Welcome to you. Welcome to James and Ava as well. Now, Iran has tonight launched waves of missiles towards Israel for the first time since the April ceasefire. Tehran says it's in retaliation for Israel's continued attacks on Lebanon targeting Hezbollah. James, Ava, your thoughts on this escalation?
Well, I think that it's going to be very difficult to know how America chooses to respond in all of this. Donald Trump has been tonight urging them to go back to the table, but it does seem at the moment it's falling on deaf ears.
Ava?
Well, we're going to see the might of America, aren't we? Whether Trump is able to convince Netanyahu not to retaliate. So potentially we're about to see a very emasculated Trump over the next week or so.
Israel's military says it's intercepted all missiles heading towards its territory, with the Chief of Staff vowing they will strike back with determination as soon as the order is given. Iran has warned it will hit back even harder if that happens. The US President Donald Trump says he's going to call, or perhaps has already called, Benjamin Netanyahu to tell him not to strike back. We've also heard from Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps tonight, the IRGC. Their statement was read on Iranian TV.
Our acceptance of the ceasefire on April the 8th was conditional upon the cessation of hostilities on all fronts. However, as always, the United States and the Zionist regime failed to uphold their commitments. They continued their aggression and crimes in Lebanon and repeatedly violated the ceasefire. Tonight's operation was a warning. Should these acts of aggression be repeated, the responses will be broader in scope.
Our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons has more now.
Donald Trump is the most important ally that Israel have, and frankly they don't have very many of them, but they do have the support of the world's most powerful man. So the thoughts of Donald Trump are incredibly significant. At the same time, Benjamin Netanyahu, the repeat Israeli Prime Minister, who is, as I speak to you, on the phone to Donald Trump, has got an election himself later this year, and he will be under a huge amount of pressure to respond to an Iranian attack on Israeli territory. And we know he's going to get that pressure because it is already mounting. Naftali Bennett, the man who is, as it stands, the favourite to be Israel's next prime minister, has told Netanyahu that he has to prove that he is the prime minister of a sovereign country. I have also had comments from other political rivals saying the Israeli public expect Netanyahu to respond, that Israel has to prove that it is not America's 51st state, and so on and so forth. Now, my understanding is that Benjamin Netanyahu will hold an emergency conference after his talk with Donald Trump, with senior figures, including the Defense Minister, Israel Katz. I assume that Eyal Zamir, the Israeli military chief of staff, will also be involved in that. Zamir has already stated his own situational assessment. Make no mistake about it, right now, Israel has rapidly put itself, if not on a war footing, then certainly on a position to respond quickly, because this does feel like an important moment. It is precisely 2 months since Iran last fired missiles towards Israel. Then we've had 2 months of uneasy ceasefire, of stop-go negotiations, incredible number of false dawns in those US-Iran peace talks. We've had the Strait of Hormuz being completely paralyzed. And of course, in the north, we've had Israeli troops flooding into Lebanon, seizing an enormous amount of territory and killing more than 3,500 Lebanese and displacing 1 million people as Israel continues its protracted conflict with Hezbollah, the Iranian-funded group in Lebanon. So that has been, in a sense, the focal point of much of the tension. It is that where Iran has found its reason to launch this attack, pointing to the fact that earlier Israel attacked a southern suburb of Beirut, having itself saying it responding to Hezbollah attacks into northern Israel. The mechanics of this are always complicated. But the simple truth is that Iran has fired a series of ballistic missiles into Israel. It would appear that all of them have been intercepted. Iran has now said that if there is any Israeli response, it will almost mechanically itself launch another wave. It says it has a list of Israeli targets that it is ready to go for. And so we enter a period of extremely uneasy peace, waiting to see whether Israel will respond, whether Donald Trump's cautionary words will be listened to, or whether Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who has built his reputation on leading his country through conflict, will feel that it is unthinkable that under his watch, Israel does not fight back.
In Washington, D.C. now, and speak to our US correspondent David Blevins, who is there. Evening to you, David. We understand Donald Trump has spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu, cautioning restraint, but he's done that before and hasn't always been listened to.
Yes, and he clearly knows this is a moment of real jeopardy for his effort to secure a deal with Iran. The speed with which he has responded to these Iranian strikes on Israel tell us that. The president is both appealing for Iran to return to the negotiating table and appealing to Israel not to retaliate. Speaking to Fox News, President Trump said the strikes would certainly not help negotiations with Iran. And then he appealed directly to Iran. He said, "You've shot your missiles, that's enough, get back to the table and make a deal." And then in a call with the website Axios, he said he was going to telephone Benjamin Netanyahu and urge him not to strike back. Each of them has had their fun, he said. If Bibi strikes them back, it's just going to keep going like the last 47 years or the last 3,000 years. Now, we understand that call has now taken place between the two leaders and that it lasted less than half an hour. Not terribly surprising, perhaps, because relations between them are rather strained right now. Last week, there was a very heated exchange on the phone between Trump and Netanyahu when the President of the United States called the Israeli Prime Minister, and I quote, effing crazy because of Israel's bombing campaign in southern Lebanon. So is Netanyahu going to be minded right now to take instruction or even advice from Donald Trump? We have also heard from the Pentagon, by the way, they say there has been no US military involvement in defending Israel against these Iranian strikes, but that it is, in their words, an active situation and they are continuing to monitor it.
David in DC for us this evening. Thank you very much indeed. Let's bring James and Ava back in. It certainly feels, Ava, again, that things are more perilous, if they weren't already.
Well, febrile, I think, has sort of characterised the last couple of years, certainly since Trump's, the last 6 months or so since Trump's bombing campaign of Iran. That certainly hasn't made things any easier or smoother. Interesting there to hear that actually the phone call between the president and Netanyahu was half an hour. I know that your correspondent there said it was very short. I suppose that is. But, that's actually a rather decent amount of time, isn't it? You'd have thought it could have just been a couple of words. Absolutely do not retaliate and put the phone down. But, presumably there was some persuading that needed to happen. And we'll see how that plays out over the next week or so, whether Netanyahu decides that he is going to fall in line with the American president or whether he decides he's going to go it alone.
It's just another reminder, James, that Iran still holds more cards than both Israel and the US would like them to have.
Yeah, absolutely, and that comes from a variety of reasons. That comes from the fact that it's been a regime that's very much been embedded for the past 4 decades. It's one that's highly decentralised. It's able to survive, it's not like a hydra, but also because it has key support among the military and professional elements of the regime that it needs. As a result of that, it has been able to carry on. And there's also many different elements to this. I'd also make the point that Britain obviously is not hugely involved in this conflict, but there is one element we are, which is that we're currently engaged in an operation with the French on mine clearance in the Strait of Hormuz. So I'll be very interested to see when we get a statement in Parliament. I expect we'll see one on Monday or Tuesday in the next couple of days, and hopefully they'll be able to give some insight on what the British role in all this is.
But the other thing that's really going to concern the UK government is the continuing unpredictable impact. I say unpredictable, it's going up. It could go up even more on inflation and on costs and on holidays and everything else that people spend their money on.
Which we certainly haven't felt the full force of or the brunt of yet. You know, that should probably come in around the beginning of July, if not the end of July. Certainly when it comes to airline fuel, that's not going to... airlines, if we're going to be boring, you know, airlines buy in future.
They hedge.
So they hedge, so they don't, you know, we won't have felt the full effect of that yet. But, you know, people will feel this in the supermarkets, particularly with their food, over the next couple of months. And then I think that's when you're going to see some objections.
And I would make the point as well that if we do get a change of Prime Minister, they're going to arrive around that time, August, September, to be told the finances are worse than they thought, and we're going to have a real need for an energy bailout of some kind come August, September. It's almost like Liz Truss 2.0, 4 years on.
Whoever the Prime Minister is, just the fact of changing the Prime Minister is going to impact the bond markets, you'd have thought, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in a time when they're increasingly jittery and UK debt looks in some ways to be very, very concerning for them, I think that it's going to be something that's the top of the agenda. And that's why we're seeing a lot of the rhetoric which Andy Burnham's putting out in recent weeks, very much moderating some of his past positions.
Yes, he could just simply say, I don't believe in the bond markets, and then perhaps they just don't exist. It won't affect us at all.
Like that,
we are getting ahead of ourselves because I have a feeling that Andy Burnham's going to make an appearance in the newspapers a little bit later on. We'll bring those to you in a bit. But to the war in Ukraine next. And President Zelenskyy has been in Downing Street this evening, meeting the Prime Minister, as well as the French President Emmanuel Macron and Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany. Those talks centred on European support for Ukraine's war effort against Russia. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi has more now from Downing Street.
What's happening with Iran, Israel and America fits into all of what is happening here. Certainly there is a understanding within Europe and in Ukraine that the United States is distracted at the moment. But Ukraine does have momentum, it does have initiative on the battlefield. And I think what's happened here today is really sending a message that Europe can do more. They're also signalling to Washington that any kind of deal that is done cannot be done over Europe's head or over Ukraine's head. It can't be imposed. And here as well, they were also trying to reinforce their unwavering support for Ukraine and send a message to Vladimir Putin that actually Ukraine does have cards to play. Remember, of course, President Zelenskyy was famously told, or infamously told by Donald Trump, that he had no cards to play. Actually, if you look at the battlefield, things are going better in that direction for Ukraine, and European powers are going to stand four square with the Ukrainians and not allow Vladimir Putin to fulfill his objectives. The message, of course, from the Kremlin, the only way to end this is through diplomacy and direct negotiations, which they hope will happen sooner rather than later.
Alex Rossi in Downing Street for us. James, it is a salient reminder, and it's amazing. These things are like buses. Suddenly you've got the Iran situation back at the top of the agenda. You've got Zelenskyy, just happens to be in Downing Street at the same moment. And we're all thinking again about both of these conflicts and probably thinking about their impact on ourselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very much why Zelenskyy was there this week, trying to cut through the sort of noise, if you want to put it in such sort of starkly cynical terms, but very much making the case for Ukraine. On Friday, we're going to see the length of this war, which has been going on since the 24th of February 2022, overtake the length of the Great War, the First World War. And I think that's a reminder that at a time when, for instance, we're seeing lots of different challenges in things like warfare and obviously international attention going elsewhere, he wants to remind them, saying, hey, I'm still here fighting the cause. And Britain, for all our many different prime ministers, has been standing with us along the way.
It has, Ava, but doing enough to help him win this thing, or just saying enough to help him remind people that it's going on?
Well, that has been the criticism that has been levied at the Prime Minister, hasn't it, throughout this, throughout the conflict, throughout the war, which is, you know, are you providing for a defensive operation rather than an offensive? And there's been multiple times that Zelenskyy has, you know, come to Europe and said, please, can you, please may I politely bomb Russia, and has requested the missiles, you know, with which to do so. And, you know, Starmer has been rather slow when it has come to that. You know, that has been their tactics. There have been some who've speculated that perhaps this war could have ended a long time ago had the full weight of the Western might been put behind Ukraine. But, you know, we are potentially getting to the end of Keir Starmer's premiership, and arguably he would like to get that sewn up. Sorry, that is predicated, of course, on if there is a leadership challenge launched over the next couple of months or so. And, you know, perhaps he would like to get it sewn up. Perhaps he would like his legacy to be that he beat Russia in the Ukraine war.
Yeah, still, James, just to finish off on this, people are waiting with bated breath to see what the government's plan is for defence spending.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something we've had a constantly running theme throughout this government. There's always been traditional institutional hostility between the Ministry of Defence and the Treasury. Under this government, it very much has been at the forefront of all the public sector debates. And I think that when it does come to looking at Keir Starmer's next few weeks, if he really wants to go on the front foot and suggest his party shouldn't change leader, then he ought to bring an offer to the table and get some way close to that 18 billion, which we keep reading so much about in the papers.
Yeah, that could be the legacy, or at least one of them. Coming up, we'll have some highlights of Yalda Hakim's exclusive interview with the Ukrainian president.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict.
The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back.
Historic day here today.
How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on.
I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out!
What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
that's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Now, just before Volodymyr Zelenskyy went to Downing Street today, he spoke to my colleague Yalda Hakim and told Yalda he would be willing to pause the front lines if it was the quickest way to peace. Have a listen now to some of that exclusive interview.
I sent him this letter openly. Nobody understands where we are with this war. And it was very important for me, for Americans, not to forget about us. I understand with all the challenges in the Middle East, but this is the biggest war during these 80 years, the biggest in Europe, and that's why this is so big, so many losses, human lives. We need to stop it. Don't make pauses because of Iran or something else. All the wars are bad, but we don't, we can't find priority. If we speak about the wars, we need to stop them as quick as possible.
At present, 70% of Russia's population is in the sight of your missiles and your drones. We saw in the last week, St. Petersburg hit twice. What message are you sending the Russian people?
It's all about how to stop him, how to make pressure on him. Yes, support of allies is good. Sanctions is better. Sometimes sanctions on shadow fleet and the energy, gas, oil is very strong steps. But Putin understands only when there is a total pressure on him, when you're strong, when your answers are strong. That's why we show that our drones will come to the cities. I said to the city because we already did it during long period of time, villages and etc. We responded small cities, but they live in St. Petersburg and they live in Moscow and they don't think what's going on in other cities of Russia. So we tried it to show them that we will be closer and closer and will bring back their war on the territory from where this war came to us.
If there were to be a ceasefire tomorrow and Russia were to agree with it, where would you want the lines to be frozen? Where they are at this moment, would you agree to that?
Yes, it's the quickest way. Of course, I want to freeze, not just freeze the conflict, because we want to live in Ukraine, not just stop the war. We want to stop, and stop the way when the war will not come back because of some crazy people and etc. if they want to come back with this war after some pauses. So it's not the idea just to freeze, but the quickest way to freeze. And to freeze and move it to diplomatic sector, to diplomacy, to negotiators.
So give Russia what they want in this moment, the land that they have gained.
No. It's not just to give. This to freeze, to stay where we stay. It meant to give people of Ukraine more possibilities to save their children and soldiers come back. And I think this is important for us. I think it's so important that we defended independence, a sovereign country, our choice. This is big victory, if I can use such word, because when you have so many losses, it's not about victory.
And in the meantime, you'll reach out to the likes of Roman Abramovich and others to try and help you in that path?
Abramovich, he came to Kiev. He said that he said, I have a message direct to you and I want to get message and take message from you and to give it to Putin.
So is he a go-between now?
When he got message from me, he said he will go directly to Putin. I said, okay, I'm ready to meet. Not in Moscow, not in Belarus, and not in Minsk, and it's understandable why. And I said, you can choose any time from tomorrow. You can choose any day, any format. We can choose with President Trump. I'm sure that he will be ready to come. And we can do it with Europeans. I'm sure that everybody wants to help, or we can choose the way bilateral, just bilateral meeting. And we spoke about outcomes, what can be, and etc. I said, look, the best way, I think it's a big signal if we will meet and make ceasefire. So after that, we've got messages that they are ready for meeting only if Ukraine will do what they decided in Anchorage. But it's terrible what they speak about. And I said it when we had meeting. Look, you can't, with all respect, even with all respect to President of the United States, but you can't cut our country, or you can't decide, our people decide. You can't make decisions without us, about us. It's unacceptable, and it will not bring peace. This is the first, and will not bring success to your countries and to your leaders. So that's why I said that the best way, if you want to stop the war against Ukraine, use, in a very polite way, use opportunity to speak with us.
Well, let's discuss that. I'm not going to say he has a spring in his step because that would be overstating it, but there certainly seems to be, James, a bit more vitality to the man, because in previous interviews, not necessarily with Yalda, he's looked absolutely, beaten, hasn't he, really?
Yeah, and I think that's very much a reflection of the conversations he's probably been having these past 24 hours or so with Western leaders, Western military and Western diplomats, very much talking about the support that they're going to get. And I think that he is keen to present himself as you say, a man who's not down and out, who wants to engage, a cooperative partner. And I think he has always played this very well throughout this whole conflict, very much been keen to kind of keep abreast of Western opinion. He knows there'll be some pressure now. We're reaching this milestone of 4.5 years of the conflict for some kind of deal, and he wants to present himself as willing to engage in that against the hostile forces of Vladimir Putin.
Nevertheless, Ava, he's not getting an awful lot of what he really wants, which is more military support, getting quite a bit of money from the European Union. I'd love to know if he raised with Keir Starmer the UK slightly relaxing its sanctions on Russian oil products, for example, to try and keep airfares down, for example.
I don't think Starmer would have liked to have heard that, would he?
No, but it is the case. It is the case.
But, I think that you could hear in that interview as well that he has made concessions, particularly over the last year or so. Like, he has certainly softened in his approach, to say there that he would, he's quite happy with where the current lines are, and he would quite like to maintain those lines. And then we hear later, we've had this line from Keir Starmer that, international borders, he doesn't want to see them changed by force. That's one of the stipulations that has been made following their conversations. Now, by force is a really interesting sort of turn of phrase or a little bit of syntax there, because, well, what do you mean by force? If Zelenskyy is, content with what land has already been potentially taken, are you just going to acquiesce and let Russia have that land? Does that not go against the entire principle of being rather upset that a sovereign nation was invaded in the first place? But, he does seem upbeat, and you could say that there's a show of strength. He's standing there with allies that have come forward for him when Trump would not, when he'd lost America. But on the other side of it, there's a twinge there of a concession, or potentially even a slight defeat.
Yeah. In the meantime, things continue in the Middle East. I think we've just got some pictures from Iranian state media of Iranian missiles heading towards Israel. No news yet of any of those landing and hurting people in Israel. It seems that their air defences have worked. But these are the latest pictures from Iran. And James, this kind of brings it home. For all the talk and that glad-handing and the photo calls that Volodymyr Zelenskyy spends his time doing when he's here in the UK, the consequences of this kind of action in the Middle East are far wider reaching than what's going on in Ukraine.
Well, I think that these different conflicts speak to different concerns. I think one of which is much more a sort of European territorial war, which could escalate, whereas obviously the Middle East, because it does control so many of the key energy supplies of the world, has very different consequences here directly, at home, more immediately felt. And so it's no surprise that those are the pictures we're seeing tonight. Obviously, I think in terms of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Some of those images have been sadly become very familiar to us. And I think also what's quite striking is having all the technology available in the Middle East means that we're now seeing these clips being put on social media and instantly brought home to us, something, of course, ironically, we first really saw in terms of that Ukraine-Russia war starting at the beginning of 2022.
Yes, indeed. It is time now to see what is making the front pages of tomorrow's papers. And The Guardian leads with Iran launching its first attack against Israel since April in response to IDF strikes on Lebanon. That story is also in tomorrow's Telegraph, which reports Tehran has warned of further extensive attacks. The Metro says thanks but no yanks, as David Lammy tells the US Vice President J.D. Vance he is wrong to blame mass migration on the murder of Henry Novak. Reports in The Eye that Andy Burnham could challenge Keir Starmer's premiership within weeks, maybe even a couple if he wins the Makerfield by-election. The Times tomorrow leads with Keir Starmer preparing to announce restrictions on social media use for under-16s, including a potential ban on what the government considers high-risk platforms, while the Daily Mail reports warnings that Britain could face a significant security risk unless the government moves faster to strengthen its defence spending. The Express focuses on comments from migrants who say they're crossing the Channel because they won't be sent back from England. On the front of the Financial Times, OpenAI is plotting its biggest revamp of ChatGPT since it was launched. That's ahead of a possible public offering later this year. While the Star splashes on the American night spots that are hoping to cash in on wives and girlfriends or wags of England players at the World Cup by charging possibly more than £1,000 for a bottle of wine. You'd hope it was a good one. And finally, the Sun leads with Katie Price's warning to her new husband. Tell me the truth, Lee, or I'll divorce you, she says. Let's look at the papers then, Ava, and let's start with Iran, which features on the front page of a couple of them I mentioned there, starting with the Telegraph, and they managed to get that on their front page, even though it happened fairly late in the day.
Yes, so very early on, The Guardian here reporting that Iran had fired a wave of missiles at Israel in response to the strikes on Beirut coming from Israel. You know, over the preceding couple of hours, we've heard that Trump has spoken to Netanyahu and urged him not to retaliate. We've also had a statement from the Home Secretary, who doesn't seem to be involved in any conversations. I think she's just posted this on Twitter and has also let people know in their email inboxes that she would rather Israel did not retaliate to show some restraint. But it doesn't look like the UK are currently involved in any of the actual conversations that are ongoing. This does seem to be exclusively between America, Israel and Iran. You know, Iran here are quoted in The Guardian as saying that this operation is not a passing event, but the beginning of a full week of continuous strikes. It's a very ominous message there that, you know, we're going to have to sort of wait and see this very febrile situation, how that's going to play out.
We have been here before, haven't we? We've had these missiles fired at Israel, not perhaps in the past, yes, in the past few months, but I'm referring to what happened last summer. And Iran would do this to rather send a message because they knew it would be repelled by the air defences. Could this be one of those? Or, as Ava pointed out there, could this be a week, maybe even longer, of genuine aggression?
I think very much as the former of those two, Matt, because I think that this is very much par for the course. You know, it's sort of you throw a rocket, I'll throw one back at you. And I think that it was so striking to see the obvious thing in Yvette Cooper's statement earlier, which was about restraint, and that very much is the case. And frankly, in a conflict like this, long-running, lots of missiles on both sides, there is a negotiable and manageable level of warfare. And this very much, sadly for people on the ground, seems to be within the boundaries of that. It's when it starts hitting things like the Kuwaiti airfields, that's when things start to get more serious. At the moment, we're very much not in that conversation. We'll wait to see. This doesn't sound as bad as some of the rhetoric we've heard from the Iranians over the past year or so.
Let's have a look at the front page of the Times tomorrow. Striking image there of Serena Williams practising before her surprise comeback at the age of 44. She's going to be playing in the doubles at Queen's, of course. Maybe preparing for a singles comeback, who knows? But the main headline here, Ava, is Keir Starmer ban on harmful social media for children. Is this one of these policies he thinks might also save his skin?
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because this has been danced with since the beginning of Keir Starmer's premiership. You know, very early on, he'd talked about wanting to limit social media and its influence on children, its very harmful influence on children. But then we sort of had this bombshell letter from Jess Phillips when she resigned from her ministerial position a couple of weeks ago, where she said, look, I've presented you with several options of how you could limit the harmful impact on children by social media companies, and you haven't enacted anything. So now it sort of feels that the gears are almost, the wheels are starting to roll a little bit. And perhaps this is because we're looking ahead to a potential leadership challenge, and so perhaps Starmer would like to get a few bits of legislation under his belt that he'll be remembered by. But I will note that this is a significant watering down on what was originally proposed. You know, even a couple of months ago, we were looking towards the Australian system. We were saying, well, they have banned social media for under 16, so perhaps we should do the same. Now we're looking at a ban on simply harmful social media, so quote-unquote safer sites would be allowed under these plans.
And who would determine what's safe? Is that going to be another job for Ofcom? And
well, exactly.
Who determines this stuff?
And I would also add to that, just very quickly, you know, there are some of these sites like TikTok who say that they're not social media sites. They say that that's not how they turn themselves, and that's how they might be able to potentially sneak themselves under this barrier.
Which is what has been attempted in Australia, hasn't it, by some of them? James?
I think this story is just Keir Starmer all over. It's too little, too late. It's watered down. It was first proposed 7 years ago, and it even features a very damning quote from a minister who says in it that Keir has entered his legacy era. The conversation's now all what is announceable in time before Makerfield. I mean, he's got sort of 2 weeks left before that, and unfortunately, this is the kind of thing which seems to sum up his premiership. And
also, if it was more substantial, it's the kind of thing that the US government wouldn't be particularly happy about. And I wonder if the spectre of tariffs might rear its ugly head again if that was the case, because the front page of the Metro tomorrow features the headline, "Thanks, but no Yanks." And this is, well, David Lammy trying to tell off J.D. Vance for his thoughts on migration in the UK, saying telling him you're wrong, apparently, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's because the Trump administration sees what happens in this country as purely a reflection of their own strategic priorities and political concerns. David Lammy was standing up for the British government's point of view on this. I mean, my view personally is that I think that the criticism from Vance misses some of the issues involved in terms of policing rather than migration and all this. But yeah, I mean, this is basically the Trump White House seeing everything through their own lens. And they're saying this about mass migration. This is something we're campaigning on. They've even got a State Department official who's very much spending her time coming over here talking about free speech. Really, it just sort of sums up the kind of difference between the Trump administration and a UK Labour government to the centre-left.
Trying to paint it in some way as Henry Novak as being a white George Floyd.
I suppose so, isn't it? I mean, sorry, we don't really have time to go into that, you know, the unbelievable tragedy that's befallen that family. I mean, but it's just very interesting, isn't it, the politics of all of this, that Lammy felt that it was worth his time to use up a bit of his political capital with J.D. Vance, that he spent up a lot of time building up with him through various fishing trips on this particular accusation that was made by the Vice President on X. You know, it is integral. You know, it really is. It's extraordinarily damaging for our cohesion if you have the Vice President of the US suggesting that apparently mass migration is so out of control here that it's leading to murders. Sorry, I hope I haven't overly summarised that. We don't have a lot of time.
No, I think it's fair enough. We will return to the papers in a minute. Coming up next, we will take a closer look at more of the top stories that are featuring on tomorrow's front pages.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget.
Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Time now for a closer look at what is making the rest of the papers. Ava, let's head to the Telegraph because we've already touched upon their main story of Iran firing a barrage of missiles towards Israel. But on the side there, that column saying that Donald Trump is, or maybe planning to buy the Chagos Islands, you know, like you do.
May I hand this to James, because he is an expert in the Chagos Islands.
James, please.
Well, that's really the art of the deal you've just seen firsthand. The hand over there. I mean, look, this is a long-standing plan that's been circulating elements of the American right, following concerns about the British Conservatives and Reform UK about the future of these Chagos Islands in the Indian Ocean. And potentially there is a plan for Trump and the State Department somehow to buy it and acquire it, maybe along the lines of, say, the US Virgin Islands, the Philippines, etc. So this is something that's been doing the rounds, but I think the Foreign Office would be very reluctant to hand them over.
Because he's chopped and changed his view on the UK's deal over Diego Garcia, hasn't he? Seemed to support it, then he said it was a terrible deal, and now he's apparently thinking of buying the whole lot.
Well, that sort of sums up Trump's diplomacy, doesn't it? Fairly mercurial, somewhat mercenary, very much susceptible to his changing whims and desires. Yeah. And I think that does show that on this issue, you know, UK foreign policy is very much beholden to America because it's a joint US-UK defence base.
Let's turn to the back page, Ava, then, of the Times and Sport. And really sad headline, this, for anybody who knows their football, because it's about Denmark's Christian Eriksen collapsing on the field again. We know he has a heart condition because this has happened before, 5 years ago, and now it's happened again to the footballer.
This is horrendous, isn't it? And I mean, you know, people will remember 5 years ago that during the Euros, he also did experience a heart attack, and he was, you know, there was a moment, I do believe he actually did die briefly on the pitch. It was a really horrendous thing to be watching as a spectator, and then today he has also fallen ill, but he has a pacemaker fitted now. So I understand that when he stood up to sort of walk off the pitch, when he'd regained consciousness, he seemed to be OK, but the game did not continue. The match was called off. I mean, it's just incredibly frightening, isn't it?
It is.
You know, and you imagine what he's grappling with, you know, especially if you're in the mind of a professional athlete like that, a football player. You know, your body is letting you down when all you want to do is play the sport. Yeah. And, you know, that's the question now, really, isn't it? I just hope that it's not someone pushing him into continuing to force his body into doing something it clearly is not capable of doing.
I suspect he loves playing football. I think I remember last time he wanted to carry on last time and wanted to continue with his career for precisely that reason. But nevertheless, hope he's OK, considering this, because the image of his Danish colleagues there on the pitch being upset is not something we thought we'd see again, because it's very similar to what happened last time. Let's have a look at the front page of the FT. Are you a ChatGPT user?
I sometimes put something in there to inspire what comes up.
Yeah.
And the unnerving thing about ChatGPT is if you're a journalist, you've got a public body of work out there, it can mimic your style, and that can be somewhat humbling.
Yes.
Seeing, you know, when they describe your
all your typos.
Yeah, all my error-strewn, touch of whimsy, really cuts a man down to size.
But the reason I ask is the main headline on the FT is they're planning a revamp of ChatGPT as a high-value super app ahead of a listing. I guess they would say these kind of things ahead of a listing, wouldn't they? But is it also showing us that perhaps they are, I mean, people who are more versed in this AI stuff than I am, saying, well, Claude, for example, from Anthropic is striding ahead and they've developed Mythos and everything else. Maybe ChatGPT, OpenAI needs to play catch-up.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the AI arms race. Everyone is going to be upping their game. I'll be interested in two things, one of which, of course, is how much that affects the kind of consequential knock-on businesses who very much rely on ChatGPT, and second of all, where that listing is going to take place. We know London's really struggled to have IPOs in recent years. I'll be curious as to whether it's going to be listed here or New York.
We should ask ChatGPT what it thinks.
And it may not get it right.
And then ask Claude. For a long time, if you asked ChatGPT how many R's were in the word strawberry, it was convinced there were only 2, believe it or not. I think they've fixed that bug.
Well, it's machine learning, isn't it? So someone's
go.
obviously convinced it at some point in time that it does have, you know...
I think it was basing it on the sounds in the word strawberry. You only hear 2 R's. Actually, there are 3, just confirming that to myself.
It's just interesting, though, isn't it? Because where on earth could it go? How could it become a super app? I mean, you've already got so many other integrated offerings.
Elon Musk said he wanted to make X a super app, didn't he? He wanted to make it like the WeChat of the West. And
there's not so much super about that app, I'll say.
There you go. But plenty super about you two. And thank you very much indeed for your time, Ava and James. It's been an absolute pleasure. Coming up on the sport, there is a new men's champion at the French Open in Paris.
I bet right now you often find yourself asking why. Why was a certain decision taken? Why did something happen? Why did they say or do that? I'm Neil Patterson, and it's my job as a journalist to find out why. Just explain why.
It's a difficult one.
Well, I mean, it's massive.
It's a very, very severe situation.
So if you want to make sense of this complicated world, Sky News' new podcast, This Is Why, is your daily fix. One story every day, and we can find out why together. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
An interview that lasted nearly 5 minutes. We talked about Prime Minister Starmer. We talked about the special relationship with who he said. It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Everything in America feels kind of torn in two right now, and it has been an intense few weeks for Minneapolis.
How many more people have to die?
This is not America.
A large and growing protest movement. They're vocal and they're angry.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
We just arrived in Doha, just ahead of President Trump, and look at that. The horse-backed military, and beyond them, the skyline of a city transformed.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
What do America's Christian faithful make of the president's pop at the Pope?
The ones that vote for him are going to vote for him through thick and thin.
Before anybody criticizes the Pope, they need to think more than twice.
Mark Stone from Sky News. Will you stop buying Russian energy? Is there any assurance for Palestinian self-determination? Of course. It's a big shift by President Trump.
Shift. This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
Sky News, the full story first.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out. What more do you need?
Let's get the latest now from Josh at Sky Sports News.
Brendan, we haven't spoken to you since the end of the World Cup, after which there was a review. Lots of things seemed up in the air at that stage. Do you think you're fortunate to be given the chance to complete the job you started?
That wasn't really up to me. I was keen to carry on in the job because
I did feel as if, you know, we've made some significant progress in the last 4 years, but the job isn't done. There's still some growth to go. I think our best days are in front of us as a cricket side. I think a lot of the stuff that we've developed over the last 4 years will allow us to shape our side as we move forward. I think, yes, we do need to make some improvements. Yes, we do need to become a smarter cricket team when the game's at its on a knife edge or the pressure's at its highest. But don't throw out what's worked previously, what's given us the base to be able to start to think about finishing off this product and making a cricket team which can compete against the best teams in the world consistently.
We'll come on to what those improvements might be, but from the point of which the review announced that the management stays in place to now, we've had 6 rounds of championship games, and given so much was up in the air and so many places perhaps up for grabs, would it have been helpful to be here for some of that cricket?
Look, we're very fortunate in being with English cricket that we have a very broad, very vast amount of people that can assist us in making sure that we identify every single player, or no player falls through the cracks. We have, from our county insight group now, which has been set up post onto our scouts, our analysts, I think through even our Lions program. I'm thinking, you know, the Ed Barneys, the David Courts, all these guys who sit within English cricket, who are filtering information through to us consistently. Selection doesn't start when we sit down at the table and start picking the side. It starts a lot broader than that and a lot earlier than that. So you're always on the phone. You're always talking and being engaged in things anyway. I don't think it needs me standing on the boundary rope to.
But have you been watching in New Zealand?
Yeah,
I mean, everything's on the stream, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
How much?
Watching, yeah. I feel like I've got a reasonable amount of idea of what's going on. I think you're never going to cover everything, but I don't think anyone could. I don't think it's realistic either. But look, I'm very confident in the systems that we have in place, that our players are identified, and when we do sit down for our selection discussions, I feel like we cover off those that we need to. You know, also really fortunate, I guess, you know, when Rob Key rang me and mentioned about taking on the white ball job, he was very mindful of the fact that being on the road 10 months a year on year is quite a difficult and demanding, as you can attest to in your role. It can be difficult and demanding at times. So
does it suggest you've got too much on your plate?
No, I don't think so. I think providing you're able to still take some of those breaks, well, I think it does. It gives you the clarity when you have a little break. It gives you a bit of clarity and a bit of time to reflect on where you've been and where you want to go in the job that you're doing, to hopefully do a good job. But you know, I'm confident that we've been able to identify as we sat there and we've picked our first test team. I'm confident that we've landed in a good spot.
What's the biggest challenge for you right now with this team?
The biggest challenge for me, I firmly believe that positive and aggressive cricket can absolutely live with smart cricket, and I think that's an area I think we need to improve. I think we play a strong brand of cricket, a strong style of cricket.
Let's take a look now at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Rain spreading across the country overnight will leave us with a showery first part of the week. Thursday will bring another band of more persistent rain too, but the weather looks like settling down a little next weekend. There'll be a north-south divide overnight with clear skies over Scotland and Ireland, allowing temperatures to fall back into single figures. There's a potential for a touch of frost in rural areas. It'll be a milder night elsewhere with extensive cloud cover and rain spreading eastward.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, that was the wrap. Thank you very much indeed for your company. All the top stories coming up right here on Sky News. Sam Nass will take you through the night. Bye for now.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
We're trying to see as much as we can. We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.